Hello and welcome to the What If podcast presented by Suicide Prevention Scotland. I'm Amy, and over 4 episodes we're continuing our mission to have Scotland's biggest ever conversation about suicide. In episode 1, we introduced suicide, what it is, why it happens. Today, we're asking ourselves, what if a dog could save your life? Yeah, you heard that right. We know that people die by suicide when they lose all hope, something we call entrapment. So how do you find hope when all seems lost? The sense that there could be a better day tomorrow and that might just be enough to keep you alive. So we're going to talk about hope, why people lose it and what it is that they need. We'll chat about the things that help us get up in the morning, whether that's a beloved pet, meeting a friend for a coffee, or being healthy and active. Before we start, I want you to know that if you are struggling or worried about someone else, you can find details of support in the show notes or over on our website, suicideprevention.scot. So this episode is all about finding hope, and I'm very pleased to say I have 3 fantastic guests joining us for this episode. I'm joined by former Rangers and Scotland striker Chris Boyd, who's here, obviously best known for scoring over 300 goals in his 600 competitive appearances that he made across Scotland and in the US. But in 2016, Chris lost his brother Scott to suicide. This was one of the reasons why he founded the Chris Boyd charity and has raised an incredible amount of money for many other mental health programmes and charities, and delivered a schools engagement programme as well. Chris, thanks very much for being with us.
Thank you. Pleasure.
We also have Lisa Marshall, a mum of 3 who sadly lost her husband Alan to suicide 2 years ago. Lisa, as I know you've said, Alan's suicide came completely out the blue. There were no warning signs, no signals at all. And you've now been sharing your experience as a bereaved mum to your kids on TikTok and Instagram as The Widow Diary. So we'll hear all about that. And we have Brendan Rooney, who is Executive Director of South Lanarkshire charity Healthy and Happy, which aims to make Cambuslang and Rutherglen the healthiest and happiest place to live in Scotland. And I know suicide prevention is a huge element of the work that you do at Healthy and Happy. I knew I was going to get it the wrong way around at least once, Brendan.
We've been called a lot worse.
Yes, Healthy and Happy. And I know suicide prevention, as I say, is a massive part of that. So thank you for being with us today, guys. Lisa, it's only been a couple of years since you lost Alan.
Mm-hmm.
No signs at all.
Nothing at all.
Tell us what was he like? What was Alan like as a guy? And just give us an idea of what it was like leading up to his death.
Yeah, he was an amazing guy. There was nobody else like him. He was so well liked. He made an impression on everybody that he met. He was just always the life and soul of the party, always laughing, always joking, always winding people up. And he was the biggest Rangers fan, so it's a privilege to be here sat beside Chris. So he loved Rangers so much, and he spoke about that quite a lot as well, and he kind of passed it on to our 2 little boys as well, started taking them to Rangers games, playing football with them. He was just the nicest guy. Nobody had a bad word to say about him. And there was just absolutely no signs what was to come, and there was no signs at all. We were together for 11 years that he was struggling at all. There was nothing. There was no signs that he lost any hope at all. The day that he took his own life, he'd done a full day at work the night before, took our son to his football training where he was a coach. He'd seen Rangers at the weekend. It was just a normal day for me, completely normal, so there was nothing at all.
That can be the hardest thing, can't it be, Chris? It's just, I mean, every suicide's different, but I know it's been 9 years since your brother Scott. If there are no signs, it can be so difficult because you find yourself retracing things and steps and thinking, gosh, what did I not see? What was it like for Scott?
I think that's the anger part that's still in a lot of people, that you search and try to find results and or why, the cause, but at the end of the day, I think, and I'll be honest, I'll put my hands up, and I always thought it was a selfish way out, but when you actually see what's the process that people have to go through, you then realise what they must have been going through at that time. As I said, even though they maybe didn't want to speak about it, but it's, I think, I sit here, as you say, 9 years on, and it's still difficult because I can remember that phone call straight away, and it's horrible. And you're always searching for the results, or searching for the reasons of why, but it's difficult to let go, and people will say, you never get over it. I think you just learn how to deal with it. And it's I mean, I've got a lot of support around me in terms of it was my brother, obviously his wife and the kids, but there'll be people out there that don't, and that's a thing that we need to. I think everybody in general needs to look after people a lot better than what we do in society right now as well, because yeah, it's horrible that we went through it, but we have got a support network around us, but there's people out there that don't.
And obviously through your charitable work, you've done a lot to try and help other people and prevent other people from feeling that same sense of loss that you have. Did you feel that quite after Scott's death, that you thought, gosh, if I can just help one person, if I can just do something with your profile, your name, all of that, did you consciously do that?
At the time, I had always, when I go back to when it happened, I was coming to the end, and I always felt as if there was something like I wanted to, because I'd seen a lot of guys when I was growing up basically struggle, and then also when you finish playing football, it was always something in the back of my mind when we'll speak about academies and the heartache that some kids need to go through when they're rejected from, and there was always something in there that annoyed me for a long period of time that could have been dealt with a lot better, and I always looked to say, okay, what can we maybe try and help bridge that gap with youngsters getting released from football clubs, help them with that heartache of being released. But then what happened to Scott, it changed the whole thing for me, and I felt as if we, with the support network that I had around me with the charity, when I sat down again and spoke about it, we felt as if we could take it in a different direction. And I think that there's a lot of unbelievable charities and people out there doing some outstanding work. And you do hear stories of people trying to, do everything on their own, and we've been pretty open, like in terms of trying to help everybody else, because the more people working together, the more chance you've got of helping a lot more, individuals who might be struggling. And for us, it was a matter of trying to bring as many people together as we could at the start. But then I think when you actually start to, you go month after month and year after year, you realise there's unfortunately, I think, and especially in Scotland, there's a generational thing that just see and still see it, mental health, as that's all right, it doesn't bother, it never affects me. And we felt as if going into the schools and trying to educate the youngsters, the adults of tomorrow, the conversation would just become the norm, because it can be difficult for people to open up and start speaking. So we felt as if, as a charity, it was best to go into the schools, start to work with kids, give them an opportunity to maybe flourish in life. But also the key message for us was, if you want to speak and you've got a problem, speak about it freely. Because I would say my generation, and definitely my dad's and older ones, they don't want to open up and don't want to speak, and we need to keep refreshing everybody that it's good to talk.
It is. Brendan, do you see that through the work that you're doing in South Lanarkshire, just this generational, I suppose, shift of people who don't want to open up, and perhaps those who do? What's been your experience of just trying to get people to actually talk about suicide?
Yes, I do see it, but it's changed over the years, actually. I started my mental health nursing career back in 1987, and it was the early 90s when we never talked about mental health at all. We talked about mental illness at that time and prior to that time. But in the early 90s onwards, we started to talk about mental health, and there was work done with the media, there was work done with the public, there was work done across agencies and so on. And actually, what we hear nowadays is an awful lot talking about mental health. It's quite openly talked about. So there's been quite a significant shift and change over the years. And my hope is that we can do exactly, so they used to talk about mental health literacy so that people knew the words to say openly and freely. And there's, that has improved immensely, I have to say. I'm hoping that we can do the same around suicide awareness and suicide literacy, so that everyone, regardless of who they are, what their employment is, business owners and so on, employers, can talk confidently and openly about suicide as well as mental health. And there is no doubt that men still to this day find it more difficult to be open about their mental health. And if we look at the statistics, the most recent stats on completed suicides, then there's 3 to 1 men to women who are completing suicide. So clearly there's still a challenge there. But I'm confident that with the progression we've had around mental health awareness and literacy, there's a 10-year Creating Hope Together strategy for suicide awareness in Scotland and prevention. I sincerely hope that in 10 years and beyond, we've set the foundations for that kind of confidence, knowledge, literacy and information to be freely talked about as much as mental health is.
I think on that, the point you make there as well, we encourage people to speak, but for me, I think it's just as important for people to listen.
Yes.
You know, yes. And I think that's
Absolutely.
The key thing, because I mean, you know, when you start speaking to people, and you know, sometimes they feel as if it's a burden on them as well. You might struggle to deal with it. You might struggle to listen to someone speak about something so deep, but I would never ignore it. And I think that's a key thing. Never go and share. If you've got a problem or somebody's came to you, go and speak to someone who might, you know, go and help them, because you could be that person that saves a life. You know, they've built up the courage to come and speak to you. They trust you with what they're speaking about. And I think that's something that has improved immensely as well, listening. Because it can be difficult for people to take in a lot of, you know, I wouldn't say information, but problems that they might, I'm a bit scared to deal with that myself.
There's also that element as well, isn't there, of it's if people, nobody has the kind of magic, the magic answer. They can't flick a switch and solve your problem. So there's an element of, you know, for people, if somebody is sharing that experience or how they're feeling, you can't always just do something right there and then. Brendan, you mentioned the word hope. That's what this episode is all about. Lisa, how did you find hope in the days and the months after Alan? I know you've got your beautiful children, but how hard was it to try and find something to hold on to after such a devastating loss like that?
It was so difficult. It was in the early days. Like, I didn't think I'd make it through a week looking after 3 children without their dad. You're dealing with your own grief, your 3 children's grief, everyone around you. It's so overwhelming. And in the early days, they were dark. They were hardest days of my life. Trying to be a good mum when your world is falling apart, and I'm sure so many people can relate to that with a lot of things in life. But I always kind of just believed that one day our lives would get better, and I don't need to have the answers today, and it doesn't need to be tomorrow everything improves. I've never really found that light at the end of the tunnel, that switch to be like, oh, that's it, that's us better. It's a suicide loss. It's something that you're never going to get over. You're going to carry it through your whole life, and my children will be carrying that as well. But for me, it was just always the kids, making sure they were okay. I just kind of channeled all my energy into being a mum. If the only thing I'd done one day was getting them to school, getting them to nursery, then that's the only thing I'd done. It was just all making sure that they were okay. And instead of looking for that light at the end of the tunnel, it's the glimmers that have kind of came through the cracks that I've kind of found like hope in, just like connections with friends, reaching out to people in a similar position. And like for this, I'm 2 years in now, and before I started my TikTok channel, like I could barely say the word suicide. I could barely mention Alan's name. Mm-hmm. I couldn't look back at pictures of him. It was just too painful. And I think there was a lot of anger there as well. Obviously leaving our 3 children as well. I think it's quite difficult. There's a whole bunch of emotions and they're intense. And I think a lot of times I felt numb as well. So it was definitely so hard to cling on to hope. But I've just always believed that they will come back slowly but surely.
See, in terms of what you're speaking about there, like, be a good mum. Like, so you're getting up in the morning, you're running after the kids all day, you're doing what you do, but at night, the kids are in bed and you yourself. How were you able to deal with that?
Deal with that, I think I'd done a lot of things that were distraction away from the grief. So you'd sit and you would doom scroll. You would sit and just like online shop, just anything to try and distract you away from the grief and what my reality actually was. I wasn't actually doing anything productive. I found it really difficult to just sit down and relax and watch TV. Even now I can't watch TV or read a book. I feel my mind's just restless almost. Mm-hmm. So yeah, a lot of that, and a lot of times at night I would try and like speak to my family, just friends, just like catching up with them. They were a huge support to me, my friends and my family. But you're right, it's very lonely once the kids are in bed and it's you, and that silence in the house, it's deafening, and without my husband there, it's really, really hard.
Can you relate to that, Chris? Just that feeling of...
Well, I think it's different for me, Amy, because I mean, it was obviously my brother, but he had his own family. I think you miss the phone calls and the text messages on a daily basis. Speaking about football, 9 times out of 10, tell me how bad I was at the weekend. But I think for me, when I look at the way it happened, and then as Lisa speaking about there, like throwing yourself into it, just keep going. I was probably guilty of that as well, and I mean, it took me a lot of years to actually. I would probably say there was times where I sat down myself and thought, right, okay, this has happened. I wouldn't say I've probably processed the whole thing, even sitting here now. I don't think you will ever. But in terms of people say go and speak to people, and what I felt myself doing was, because through the charity and the psychologists that we were using at the time, I felt as if I was asking questions, pretending it was somebody else, but it was actually me. But it's probably wrong. I should have went and spoke to people and sat down and had an honest conversation with them. But I was living a chaotic life at the time as well, in terms of you're non-stop, my own kids, and running about after them and doing what you need to do. Football and in terms of media stuff as well. So I mean, I was always in the go, and similar. You just throw yourself into everything. I mean, I remember going back into football the next day, and it was everywhere, and the newspapers, the news, and I think the big thing for me was, because it's like people start saying, oh, this happened, that happened, this was happening, that was happening. I brought the full, I was at Kamal at the time, brought the whole football, everybody that worked at the football club into the dressing room and stood up. And it was a big thing for me at the time, because I just put it all to bed. This is what happened. That was it. And I had to move on. I went back on the pitch the next day. As I said, I look back now and I think, what were you doing? Going back on the pitch. And the right thing to do was address everybody, because I didn't want, as I said, stories to start going about, oh, this happened. Because what it's like when you're, it's near, Kilmarnock's near the village that I'm from, and people will start to hear things, and it was the right thing for me to address everything. But I look back now and think, inside 48 hours you're back playing football. But what was I thinking about?
But it's funny, because you realise, and it's through these kinds of conversations, don't you? You realise just how differently people will handle grief. And then you'll meet somebody who does the same thing as you, and you think, oh my goodness, I'm not the only one. Because I similarly went back. I remember going back on the radio days later. But I think initially there's a shock, and there is that real, you have to hold on to normality. And it is, whether you're getting the kids up, you have to keep some sort of routine going to get you through the shock initially. But then it was that feeling of, probably when reality hit,
absolutely.
That's when that kind of hopelessness set in for me in my experience. And I'm wondering, Brendan, if that's what you've seen through your work. It's the fact that there can be, for people who've gone through a suicidal bereavement, there is that initial shock, and like they're handling it and carrying on with their life as normal. But when reality sets in, it can be really difficult.
Yeah, no, many times, and I have to say, never cease to be amazed at the resilience and strength of people who have been bereaved by suicide, and so it's probably the largest trauma in someone's life, actually, and certainly the need to just put one step in front of the other day by day is almost like a driving sort of saving force, actually. But you're right, being there ready to catch someone when they fall, and having a network of loved ones, family, friends, neighbours, and community actually around, and that often is the case. In fact, we see that throughout Scotland, actually, and in South Lanarkshire as well. There's an amazing what we don't hear day to day, week to week, month to month in the media is the wealth, the really vast range of excellent work that goes on, voluntary, from all age groups. There are groups, communities of interest who are ready, willing and interested to support those who are bereaved in whatever form of bereavement. The community that's grown from those who have been bereaved by suicide is, I have to say, inspirational. The work that they do to support themselves, those who are in the group, but those, and then looking out the way, it's really quite inspirational. We don't hear that on mainstream media because it doesn't sell.
I think it's a thin line though as well, though, because there are people who will support you and there are people who want to be there, but I mean, you're the exact same. Like, you're hurting. You're inside, it's ripping you apart. But people will always ask how you doing, and it's like, you know exactly why they're asking and they mean the right thing. But you're never going to come out and say, "Oh, I'm really, really struggling. I'm this." Like, as when you, because you feel as if I need to be there for the kids. You need to be there for, and I think that, like, it can be difficult to communicate with people. My mum struggled with that. I think from where she used to, in terms of going to shops and everything, she's totally went away in a different direction. And it's not, personally, I think because that, and how you doing, how are you today, you're saying the same things every single day. When you're inside, it's ripping you apart. So people mean well, but at the same time, it can be very difficult for the person who's having to deal with what's been left behind.
How do you think, Chris, people can find hope? I know you, after Scott, as you say, you were back playing and you've done all your charity work. What are the things you think people can do who are maybe feeling suicidal, or they are struggling just to try and get through it?
Yeah, well, as I said, I was fortunate enough that I had a good group around me, and I mean, there's families that don't have that. But for me, I've always been someone who, routine for me is key. And I think that you're dealing with a lot of heartache as well at the time. And everybody will say it, and I mean, I don't know if it's true or not because I've never really done it. But I think when you sit around, when you lie around, you start to feel things, that will probably hurt you even more. You get, then you could be the one who starts to, struggle mentally. Listen, that might not, as I say, I threw myself right back into work. I threw myself into probably trying to throw everything to the back of my mind to get that routine back, to get on with my life. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. Mm-hmm. It probably isn't for a lot of people. But I do look at, and you listen to a lot of, especially adults and even kids who are struggling mentally. I think a lot of it is because they don't have any structure or routine in their life. And for me, I had to get back to doing what I was doing. Mm-hmm. I mean, it would maybe, as crazy as this sounds, being on a football pitch, and I know people will think, you've got people are shouting all sorts from the stands and they'll have a go at you and everything. But that was my safe place. I could switch off because I had to concentrate on what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And even in training, you're back with the guys and you're enjoying it and everything. And that's why I asked Lisa, like, probably similar to you when you're dealing with the kids.
Yeah.
But then after it, you're like, whoa, right, okay, I'm on my own now.
Yeah.
And that's, as I said, I think you need to get that routine as quickly as you possibly can. And that's not just if you're, in terms of suicide. Or, for me, I think in life in general, it helps you as an individual if you've got routine.
Do you agree, Lisa? I mean,
Absolutely.
You spoke about the kids, but just having routine, would you say that's something that's given you that hope? Is there anything else you can put your finger on? I know for me it was, I needed to get back exercising because I knew I got into quite an unhealthy routine of I was drinking far too much, and I knew that when I then was drinking too much I felt worse. So for me it was, once I could get back to work and I started exercising again, that really was like, right, I'm feeling better, and because I'm feeling better physically, I'm feeling a lot better mentally. Was there something that you did? Is that when you decided to take to social media and try and help other people? Was that a source of hope for you?
A little bit. In the early days, I remember it was maybe a month after Alan died, and after having 3 kids, I hadn't exercised in about 8 years. So I was like, I need to start exercising. I can't just sit about. I need to do something. So I got an amazing personal trainer, and even to this day, I see her twice a week. Mm-hmm. Started Pilates, yoga, just things like that. And I also turned to spirituality as well. So I do quite a lot of Reiki and holistic things as well. Just anything that can help you feel better and release those endorphins, I think. So positive, definitely. And with the social media, that was like 2 years after. Mm-hmm. I feel like it's been building up to that to kind of share my story and hopefully help others.
And you absolutely are doing that. Brendan, how important is it, I guess, when we're thinking about suicide prevention, that, as Chris mentioned, having that structure, that routine, that good support network around you? exercising, like Lisa and I have been saying, how important are those good habits versus what can be contributing factors? I'm thinking about things, alcohol, drug use, all the things that we know can be contributing factors to somebody taking their own life. So how important is it to counter that with good habits and good routines?
It's very important. My experience tells me there's no one size fits all, so it'll be different for different people in different circumstances. But broadly, when we're doing more healthy activities in life, it generally does, improve our well-being and our health and mental health overall. Activity, particularly, and eating and so on. So all of that absolutely definitely makes a positive contribution. Chris mentioned earlier about what about those who don't have the network around and who may be somewhat isolated, and particularly in probably the most traumatic period of their life. And it's certainly my hope that as we progress throughout this 10-year Creating Hope Together national strategy, that at year 10 or before, and certainly soon after, that no matter where you live in Scotland, that there's a local group or organisation that can help you when you need it. Now, that may not be immediately, that may be 3 months, it may be 1 year, maybe 2 years later, that there's a local group or agency that can help, that you can drop in, that you can walk into. And also, in addition, that there's a really good online resource available to everyone so that friends, family, neighbours, brothers and sisters, mums and dads can say, do you know there's a local organisation that can help you? I know you're in trouble. I don't understand what your experience is, but they do. Go and see them. Or go online and you'll be able to get the information you need and the help that you need, and that may well then signpost that person to a local group, and there's more and more of them springing up in Scotland. There's more and more groups and charities who are starting to train, so where, if someone's feeling suicidal, where do they go and talk? And sometimes they don't, but often it'll be a taxi driver, there'll be a hairdresser, there'll be a bartender, and so on. So we're starting to train up taxi drivers, hairdressers, bartenders, where people go, where people talk, or where they might talk, to give those taxi drivers and so on the confidence and the information, the knowledge to say, are you thinking about suicide? Mm-hmm. And just that one conversation can be a glimmer of hope, because no one else might have had the confidence to ask.
It's an interesting one though you say there, because like if you, in terms of taxi drivers, and like a lot of, I might be wrong. You might tell me it's totally wrong, but I think a lot of the time you never really hear a lot of people speaking about it before they do it. So
true.
So I think in terms of being able to bring that conversation out with somebody, that might be enough for them not to do it. As I said, nobody really speaks. And everybody, I think there's the old stigma that's around suicide as well. Did they leave a note? Was there a note? It very rarely happens as well.
Yeah. I think it's given that confidence. So if hairdressers and employers, work colleagues, and so on, it's just if they offer the training, give the information, and therefore the confidence to say, are you thinking about suicide? Because that training,
and being that direct as well, Brendan. Because I think
that's really important.
I'd spoke about this before as well. When I felt like that after Wayne died, because I really did feel suicidal for quite a long time. And I remember thinking, see, if somebody asks me, I would tell them. If somebody actually said, are you feeling suicidal? And directly had that really difficult conversation, I would tell them. But I got so good at putting the face on, so good at carrying on, that nobody probably would have noticed. But as you say, it's about giving people the tools to have those difficult conversations. And just by having this conversation and putting it on people's radar, which is what you're both, you're doing that as well, Lisa, on social media. You've been doing it through the charity stuff, Chris. We are making people think about it and talk about it. And yes, it might not always make a difference, but we're having those conversations.
And it's never going to stop.
No.
I mean, we're not naive enough to think that we're having conversations, we're having charities, organisations going. It's never ever going to stop. I mean, it's part of life. But what we can do is actually, give people the best opportunity to think about it. And the consequences and everything that comes along with it. As you say, there's no magic wand where you're able to use and everybody, the problems will go away. It's about, sharing them, everybody trying to help each other. And as I said, you know, for me, if you can be that better human being that helps one or two people, then you will make a difference to society. Society's hard enough. People are hard enough to deal with on a daily basis. But the last thing you need is, when you're really struggling, is for, you know, more people or others to be on top of you and having a go at you. And there's people out there that they don't have anybody around them. And I think that's something where, you know, it's probably looked upon that needs a lot of help in terms of it's easy for us to sit here and say structure, routine, blah, 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 blah. But there's people who don't have that. There's people not able to get up in the morning. There's people not able to get out of their bed. You know, so it's there's a long way to go.
Do you think there's, for people who do feel like that, who are not in the position that we're lucky to be in, you know, as you mentioned, good support networks, and are talking about it, and, you know, we've got jobs and people around us. Can you say anything? What could you say to someone who is feeling totally hopeless, totally trapped, and doesn't have that support network, or doesn't have that thing that they can hold on to that makes them want to see another day? What can you try and say to somebody like that?
I think you've always got, I mean, you've always got something to hold on to. That's yourself.
Yeah.
That's yourself. We always look at what we've got around us, and we're hugely grateful of the support you've got around you. But at the end of the day, you've got, the main reason is yourself. You know, and I think, you know, you can get yourself into positions where you are struggling. There's no doubt about it. You might feel there's nowhere to turn, but there is always somewhere. And sometimes it takes people to hit rock bottom before they turn around. We've seen it, stories before, where people have been struggling, you know, with what's going on in their life, but they always find a way. Humans are resilient. They'll bounce back. But as I said, you need to feel, you need to want it. You need to have a purpose. You need to have, you know, it's easy, I'm going to get out of my bed in the morning. It could be a simple thing of just getting out of your bed and brush your teeth to get you out of it. Because a lot of people, you know, how many times you say, when you've maybe been out drinking, you're just lying in your bed all day. And you don't, but if you say, right, I'm getting up to go and brush my teeth, you're out of your bed. You break that habit of lying in your bed. I mean, people will speak about animals. I think a dog and things like that as well, being able to, you know, you're never going to sit in the house and let a dog do the toilet all over it. You're going to get up in the morning.
They give you a reason.
You're going to get up.
Give you a reason, don't they?
You're going to look after it. Yeah. So there is always something. But as I said, it has to come from within. Has to come from within.
And you have to help yourself, because that's the thing as well. I feel Alan would have done anything to help anybody. If any of his friends came to him and said that they were struggling, he would have really cared for that. And one of his friends that he grew up with from school, he ended up taking his own life a few years before, and he was really affected. He was directly affected by suicide. And for me, I didn't know a single person that had been affected by suicide, and because my age as well, I was 31 at the time. So for me, reaching out to support groups, I feel that's when I really started to grieve, and there's more and more popping up in the community. I go to a place called Here, I know Natalie was in before, but there's also Sobs as well, and meeting people and the kind of walking the same path as you, I find it really comforting. They have the same feelings as you, and people further down the line, even looking at Chris, I know you've been through the same thing, and you're 9 years down the line, it's a comfort that you're still here and you're still having a nice life, and there's so much hope in that as well, to me, looking at people further forward in their journeys as well.
It's that sense of community, Brendan, that we come back to. It's
very much so.
You know, feeling like you're not alone in this.
Very much so. And I was thinking about hope in this context. You know, for some, there may be a darkness for whatever set of circumstances and reasons. And, you know, someone asking you, you know, are you thinking about suicide? Can just be like lighting a candle in a dark room. It might just be enough to say, yes, I am. And that just opens that conversation that someone is willing to listen. So the message that we've always given to children and young people, in particular through mental health and suicide awareness education, there's always someone willing to listen. That could be your friend, it could be your auntie, your uncle, your mum, your dad, your neighbour, and, you know, teacher, and so on. There's always someone willing to listen. And just to keep that candle in that dark room, if we can keep that going, it doesn't always happen, and it's difficult to maintain it. So that a person who's in torment, wants to end their life for whatever set of reasons, that there is someone willing to listen, that there is a candle that might light up ever so slightly, that's hope in this context.
Yeah.
And I think in that as well, the point you make, for me, yeah, it might be difficult to, for people to listen. And but if you look, they would rather listen and try and help you than go to your funeral
Absolutely.
Totally.
5 or 6 days later. And that's the, you might think that that problem, you don't want to share that with someone, but trust me, that person would rather listen to your problem than go to your funeral.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Just tell someone, and you don't have to say why you're feeling that way, because sometimes you won't know how you're feeling that way or why. Just anybody, they'd be willing to help.
But just getting out there.
Yeah, that's the hardest thing, I think.
Thank you to the three of you for
Thank you for your time.
sparking
Thank
that
you.
conversation. Just before we go though, we do have a little surprise, don't we, Chris? Going to give you that.
There we go. Sat in the green seat as well. There we go. Oh, I'll give you that.
Oh my
Obviously can't
goodness.
get thinged because of this, but
Oh my
As we know,
goodness.
Alan was
Oh,
a massive Rangers fan, as you
Yeah.
said, and his favourite player sitting right
I
here.
know. Oh, that's amazing. Thank you. Thank you so much, Chris. That's so kind. Thank you so much. That's amazing.
it's not
Thank
one of
you.
my old ones though.
No.
It's too small.
When Alan stag do, he actually had a picture of you on his top and all the stags as well, which would have been weird for you to see like 20 of them in Benidorm, which is crazy. But yeah,
It must have
I
been
found
some.
it
It must have been some size of t-shirt to fit this head on it.
What would
No,
you make?
thank you so
What would you
much.
make of that?
I know, honestly, I think he'd be so proud. So thank you so much for having me on and letting me meet Chris. That's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank
The
you.
kids will love that. Thank you.
Thanks to you, Lisa, Chris,
Thank you.
Brendan. Really appreciate it. Thank
Thank
you. Remember, if you're worried about yourself or someone else, support is available. We've popped details in the show notes, or visit our website at suicideprevention.scot. That's also where you can learn much more about the work that's been done at Suicide Prevention Scotland to deliver the Scottish Government and COSLA's joint strategy, Creating Hope Together. And thanks to you for joining us. We will see you next time. Take care.